Hello. The video that follows begins the assembly of an Excel Power Query checkbook, starting with the transaction worksheet. Future videos will build the checkbook, adding automatic categories of credit card expenses, time segments for expense tracking, automatic bank reconciliation, archiving records, and segmentation of archived expenses. I hope you'll find it useful. The primary purpose of this video is to describe the transactions worksheet of the Excel Power Query checkbook. But we're actually going to start in the categories worksheet. And I've listed some categories to track, and these are completely customizable. So the first thing we're going to do is take the categories that I've listed and make them a table. And so we go from the Home tab to Format as a Table. Choose any style you like. The table does have headers. And in the table name, we're going to call this TBL cat name. I'll point out that this also includes a reminder sheet. There's another video on the reminders for quarterly reminders, but this is used in conjunction with the transaction sheet because the reminders appear both in a message box from a macro and in the transaction sheet. So let's go to the transaction sheet right now. You can see here is the reminder cell. Inside the reminder cell is an if statement, which once again is described in a previous video, which deals specifically with the reminders. So what else is in the transaction sheet? There's the beginning balance of the year. There is the current year, which is the today function, the year of today. And there's also a today function used with a long date format so that we can easily find out which day it is when we visit the transactions from the checkbook. There's a current bank balance, which I'm not going to deal with until we get done with the balance calculations, but the columns in the transaction sheet has the date, the ID of the transaction, a description of the transaction if you care to put in a memo, the category, and that will come with data validation from the categories table that we just set up. Type will also include data validation, but it'll either be income or expense or a transfer, and the amount of the transaction. If it's an expense, the amounts will be negative, and then finally the balance. We note that this is a table, and if we're clicked in it, we can look at the table design and see the name of this table is TBL check. So let's do the calculation of the balance, which is simply going to be the amount from the previous balance unless we're starting from the beginning of the year. And we can see the beginning of the year balance is up here. So the first thing to determine is if we're the first entry of the year. So that's an if statement. And are we in the row below the header row? So we'll find the row of the amount. And if it equals the row of the table header, plus 1, then we're in the row below the header and we want to go up to G1 here and then add the amount to that. It should be absolute addressed. But if we're not in the row below the header. We just want to get it from the previous balance, which is just going to be the one above. And since we're in H4, that would be H3. And then we add the amount to that. And we'll enter it. Oh, too many arguments. So there it is. Right there. Now, one of the things that we might want to be careful of is, since all our expenses are negative numbers, we'd like to check and make sure that if the type is an expense, that the amount is in fact a negative number. So that's one more if statement on top of the one we've already have. So let's go to the beginning, and we'll use if. And we'll use an and here because we want to see if both the type equals expense and the amount is greater than 0. So if both of those are true, then we'll want to check the entry. Otherwise, we just do the row check and get the proper balance. I guess to do that, I need another paren here. So now we can make sure that we don't accidentally put an expense as a positive number. And let's go over to the current bank balance. The current bank balance is going to depend on the clear column. So whenever the bank shows that it recognizes the transaction, we'll stick a C here, a lowercase c. And when the bank statement is issued and it's cleared through the bank statement, then we'll have a macro that will put a 3-character month abbreviation to describe which statement cleared which transaction. You can see that all of the ones that I've entered have already been cleared in the January statement, but let's look at the current bank balance formula. We'll show it here. You see it takes the beginning balance of the year. It does a sum if of any of the clear column rows that have 3 characters in it. That's the triple question mark. And when the bank statements are cleared, all the month abbreviations will have 3 characters. And it will sum the amounts column for any of those rows. And it will add to that any of the amounts columns in which the clear column has a C. The C goes in when the bank recognizes the transaction but before the statement is issued. So there are 2 sum ifs. It takes the beginning balance. It takes a sum if for anything in any row that has 3 characters in it, which will be our different months in which those transactions are cleared for those bank statements. And then finally there's the sum if for the C column, which means that the bank recognizes the transaction has been made but has not yet issued its statement. And that way we can always see what the bank thinks we have, and our balance will always be what we have left after all of our entries have been transacted. We're going to add a total row to this transaction sheet as well, because when the year goes on, we're not going to be able to see the top of the sheet easily. So we're just going to make a bank balance transaction in we'll stick it in the memo part of the totals row. So let's click in the table, go to the table design, add a totals row. And here in the totals row equals bank balance, colon, and we'll stick a concatenate to that, the current bank balance. So if we want to make it with a $sign, I guess we could do that as well. So we should have bank balance. Look at the bank balance. We'll put a $sign in front. And then there we go. So now whenever we come to the transaction sheet, we will be ready to enter any of the transactions. But the real benefit of the Excel Power Query checkbook is the automatic entry of the categories with credit card statements. And that will be coming up next. I guess right now, though, we should make sure that we have these as data validations. So let's go to the Data tab, go to Data Validation. The data validation will not take lists that are table references, but it will take an indirect of a string that looks like a table reference. So we call that table cat name, and the column is called categories. So that should give us our data validation. I need a T in the table. And now we can select from our categories, and finally the type. That's either going to be an income, an expense, or a transfer. So that we can create a list all on our own. Finally, we're going to take a look at the conditional formatting in this sheet. Two of the rules are in the clear column so that we can get a gray for any of the bank statements that have been cleared, and a green when there's a C, which means that the transaction is cleared by the bank but the statement hasn't been issued yet. So let's take a look at conditional formatting, and we'll look at the rules. And we can see that when the cell value is C, let's edit that rule. So specific text containing a C, we format it with the green. So we'll see that as green, but we should apply it to the table, and that means we'll have the table underscore CHK, and that's in the clear column. Now we also have the triple question mark, so that means when we get the bank statement month abbreviations, they'll be gray, and that's formatted in a similar way, and this will also be with the table check clear. The last one is a formula so that the date column will show blue for future dates, dates that are greater than today. And that's done with a formula. Let's take a quick look at that. And we use A4, which is the first date, and we use it relative, and it's greater than today. So anything in the date column that has a future date beyond today will show blue, so we can see which payments will be in the future. Okay, so those are the conditional formatting that's done to the transaction sheet, but the real benefit, the time saver for the checkbook with Excel and Power Query is the distribution of credit card expenses to categories. We'll see that coming up. That's all for now.